I thank you. And now I give the floor to the next representative of the civil society. You have the floor, ma'am.
Wei, good afternoon, distinguished delegates. Today I stand before you as a proud Yankunytjatjara woman, mother of 4 and a second-generation survivor of the British nuclear tests that took place in the 1950s through to the 1960s in South Australia, Australia. My name is Karina Lester. My traditional lands are in the middle of Australia, in Yankunytjatjara country. Sand hills and dry riverbeds, but this is my home. My father was blinded by the first mainland nuclear bomb test in Australia, roughly 160 kilometres away from my father's birthplace at Yankunytjatjara on the 15th of October 1953. He was a young boy when the low-lying black mist came through his camp, poisoning the country, poisoning people. Arnoyoda. By 1957, at the young age of 16, his whole world would turn into complete darkness. Some of our elders died, those who were weak, and everyone started to experience strange illnesses that they'd never felt before. The radioactive legacy of the British nuclear testing in Australia runs through our family. My father never saw my siblings or myself or his grandchildren. He knew us all by voice and by colour. He committed much of his life to working for Aboriginal rights and for the end of nuclear weapons. Throughout the decades, very little support has been offered to some people impacted by nuclear weapons, but the vast majority have had nothing. Now, so many of those first witnesses and frontline affected people have died and passed, many from radiation-related cancers and illnesses. But the impacts of the bomb didn't stop with them. Their damaged DNA is cruelly passed down to children, grandchildren, and great-grannies. Article 6 and 7 of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons are deeply significant for survivors and descendants of nuclear weapons use and testing worldwide. We look to these articles with hope. We also look to the articles with expectation. With this treaty, you have an opportunity to do the right thing for communities affected by nuclear weapons. Tangible, grounded, practical good, and this needs to be done soon. Research into the health impacts of nuclear testing could be funded. People with radiation-related illnesses could be transported, and medicines and the environment contamination could be and needs to be addressed. We can begin the conversation on what nuclear justice needs to look like for us affected communities, us with the lived experience. But we need to get it right. In relation to the proposed International Trust Fund, there must be meaningful participation of affected communities in how it runs. It must be open to First Nations peoples and affected communities in states not party to the treaty. Don't make us pay again for the wrongs of the governments that have harmed us and that remain outside of the treaty. Such governments should also be able to contribute to the fund before becoming states parties. This practical support is a meaningful way for governments to support the goals of the treaty and to be accountable for historic harm. I am concerned and deeply saddened that my own country has not yet signed and ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. My country, my traditional lands, was felt and has felt the reality of nuclear weapons use. We even launched the movement that brought us to this day here in New York, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Yet despite promises, despite the expectations of community members and parliamentarians, and despite the clear and urgent need, we are still waiting. Australia is the gap in our region. And this is shameful, nothing but broken promises. Many of our friends in the Pacific Islands and those in Southeast Asia have joined this treaty. We call on our government to sign and ratify, to join this community of nations in working together to abolish nuclear weapons. I am here today with my 17-year-old son, William. I want his future and that of all my children and grandchildren, and the children of our world to be protected from the uncivilised and brutal threat of nuclear weapons. These weapons have already taken too much from us, and it's time now for repair and for making things right. Thank you, Mr. President.